Alright guys, so recording started. Today we're going to be going over lessons 7 and 8, which have to do with CSS transitions and JavaScript events. Transitions and class properties and things like that. So first we're going to look at manipulating CSS through using JavaScript. I made a very simple example here. I've got a little bit of text in a div, and I'll open that in a new tab just so we can go really into it. And each one of these buttons allows us to change it, the color of the text. Real simple, real basic. I can hide it and show it. And this is just a basic demonstration using a couple of things that we are able to change. So the main component there being document.getElementID, which in this case is text, and then changing the style component of color to whatever color I passed in which case it was, sometimes it was red, green, blue, black, whatever you could use, hex values, whatever you want to use. And so it changes that color to that. But we don't have to necessarily use color. We could do background color. Let's do background color. Or just background, that would work. So if I do that, see now the red is the background color and not the text color, and so we can do things like that. We can do, let's just hide that for now. So, 1 second. So we can do things like, I don't know, text size, and, no, font size. And then let's do 3. Maybe that didn't work. That's probably just a different attribute here, so maybe let's try that. Nope. But you get the idea. You change this part here and you can do different triggering things. And there's probably documentation on what things you can change with style, but things with dashes probably don't work the same way. But, maybe width. No, that's not going to work. Okay, I haven't played around with text as much on that one, but for other things that maybe boxes and so forth, you can change the style elements of it real easily doing those kinds of things. It allows us to do things like as well change classes. Visibility is one of them, so like this button down here, see we hid that button, we also hid the text, and now the show button, so it kind of toggles between those two. So the next thing we can do is we can change between classes. So in that first example, we are just simply changing the attributes of the class itself. And in this next one, we're toggling between two. So in this case, a very simple example of if this class is the current class, change it to this class. And if this one's the current class, change it to this one. So if I click on it, it'll turn into a circle. And if I click on it again, it turns into a square. Real simple. Just allows us we can change things real easily by either modifying the elements themselves or by changing the class to something else. And I use that quite a bit in my in that demonstration you were seeing before, where I just alternated classes where I had one ready to go. It was just easy to change with a class from one thing to something else, and it completely allowed me to do a whole bunch of cool and interesting things. And it's cool because, sometimes you can do things like, let's open this in CodePen, like animations. For example, in this one here, I've got an animation for turning it into the correct shape. So these are my animations right here, from A to B and B to A, and it's just simply, changing the border radius and the background color. And so that is an animation that runs every time the class changes. It only runs once. So that's one cool idea you can do, but I mean, there are so many others. You can do just about anything you want with that kind of thing. So changing the class is a real effective way to trigger animations, to make cool effects, and things like that. So next, let's move into lesson 8. So you guys got a good grasp on that one? Pretty simple.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so the next one, lesson 8, this was a lot more fun. So I'm going to open this one in CodePen again because it was more fun. So this next one here, we can, like I was saying, and I started talking about there, we can trigger things like animations and triggering them with JavaScript. So this one here, let's look at the JavaScript and the CSS. in this case, I literally just swapped the classes, kind of like that previous example, but this time with more interesting effects. So notice my sunrise, the background changed color, the sun changed color, and the water changed color. Obviously this is very simple. I didn't go into like waves and everything like that, like I did with my final project thing, but you can see the cool little things you can do with that. You know, you can move objects from one point to another, see that everything got dark again, and it was just as simple as just changing from one class to another and adding little animations to it. So the animations in this case were just this keyframe. So scale in, which is from here, where is it? That's the wrong one. No, that's the right one. So yeah, just things like moving where it is. This one here is for the ripple effect. That's right. Sorry, I had that backwards. And these ones, here it is. No. Circle. The ground. Here we go. So we've got ground, and then we've got transform ground. So transform active and then transform. That's where it is. It's been a minute since I've looked at this. So what I did was I simply added from transform to transform active, and that was what changed these objects. So ground and transform active ground are different, and so that transition is what makes them different, and that's all I've added there. I mean, it could be as simple as that, really. That just allows for more compatibility with different browsers and things like that. So allowing for that transition part there means that whatever color is here will change from the other one. So I can make this whatever I want, and that'll change it. Let's say it's going to be red. So if I click on this, it's now red, but it transitions. See?
Mm-hmm.
And so you can transition that just by putting the word transition into that. So if it changes to that class, it'll transition within 2 seconds. And you can add little cool things like ease in and things like that. There's a lot of cool documentation on it. And we'll go into some more examples of that in a minute. But I thought that was just a good example of that. You know, the background color is changing by clicking on the sunset, and it allows for, you know, this cool little effect of the sun rising. And yeah. So the next one, we don't have to necessarily do it on click. So this one here was creating CSS transitions and animations in CSS and triggering them with JavaScript. So there's multiple ways we can trigger it. This one here was on click, and this one here is on hover, which obviously goes into a little bit more in this one here, I think, as well, but we're not there yet. So this one is just, you chase it. Like, you know, it goes the opposite of where you're going. And the only thing that's being triggered here is on mouse over. So move this, and this being this element. So we go to the JavaScript. As soon as you put your hand or the mouse over the ball, it moves to the other side. So it's just a simple, let's move it over here. It's just a simple animation of moving it from one to the other. So what we were talking about before, these are the two steps here. Transform, translate. So it's translating translate X. So it's moving 350 times itself, 350% of itself to the other side. So there's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 and a half of itself across. And we can change that to, let's say, 450. So it's based on the size of the ball. So if it'll go out there type thing. We can change, we could do that in pixels if we wanted to. I was just trying to keep it based on a, yeah, there we go. So we can do like pixels and everything like that as well, but that's just, it worked better for me for that one. So, but you can do some cool things with that. So in this first case, it's same situation where I've got transform and then I've got transform active, and I've got, that's just two classes that are being given. In one case, it's transform, and its position is where it's supposed to be, and it's 0% of where it's supposed to be. And in this case, it's 350% of itself where it's supposed to be, and it's over here. And that happens in 1 second. We can change that, and there's that ease I was talking about, so we can change that to like 3 seconds if we want to, and it'll be faster going one way than the other, so faster and slower. And we can go less than a second too. We can do like milliseconds. So we can do 500 milliseconds, and that becomes half a second. So we got that, and then boom. So it's like half as quick, and we can go even slower if we want to. Like even quicker if we want to. So it's just depending on what we want to do, and there's a lot of real cool documentation on that as well. So, so to summarize, in this one here, we can manipulate CSS class properties using JavaScript, things like style.visibility, and there are many other things that you can use to modify what you're looking at. So, the text is red, blue, green, black, hidden, shown. We can do a lot of cool things with the text. We can change its class. We can do another thing you could do is potentially, and I didn't have an example for this, but you could change what the div is or something like that. You could change the type. So you could change it from I don't know, maybe a heading 1 to a heading 2 perhaps. But you can do some cool things like that by probably with some cloning and so forth. It'd be a lot more complicated, but that is possible. So yeah. Anyway, you guys have any questions?
No. No, it was clear.
And actually, there's some cool
ones.
This
is really cool.
Yeah, there's some really cool ones. So let me go back to my code pen. I did a really cool animation earlier today, which demonstrates some of those things. This one here. So my water level rising that you saw in, where's the display? Change view. Ah, weird. I have it resized. There we go. That's what's wrong. So if I hit refresh, so there's two objects being skewed right there, and I've used for that one, it's the same div, but I'm using before for one and after for the other. So in this case, the water itself, which is the main background div, is the full size of the screen. We could change that to whatever we want. Let's say we wanted to make this border radius 50%, and that would give it a circle. See, now it's filling up like it would a circle. Or let's say, so you can do cool things like that. So this is the background of that, and then these before and after, they act like separate divs. Let's do. So you can do cool things like that. But yeah, the background and everything. Let's do 50% and 50%. Nope, it's not going to work that way unless I have border radius. But you get there's some really cool stuff you can do though. And another thing this uses something like one of the background images is skewed a little bit, and it kind of skews back and forth. So you can see that here, transform skew. So there's some cool animations you can do with like skewing, where in this case it skews a little bit, 1 degree, then -1 degree, then 1 degree, then -1 degree, and then by here it's back to where it should be and goes beyond the page just to make sure it's not hanging out below. And so that allows for this cool little effect where I've got, two levels. One, it looks like there's the surface of the water and that you're underwater. So it gives a cool little effect right there. And these two bubbles are very similarly. I've got the bubbles div, and then I've got bubbles after, which is the other, and bubbles before. So those are the other two. Those are the two bubbles, whereas bubbles itself is the size of the full screen. So it allows me to use this whole thing as like my canvas for where I want to put it. So this bubbles here is the whole screen, and then bubbles after is one of my bubbles. Let's make this background color red, just so you can see what I'm talking about. There we go. So there's that bubble there, and you can see it behaving completely separate to the other one. But it also follows this path. I could put it on a different path, but it's following kind of an animation path. And but yeah, there's some really cool stuff you can do and trigger it. In this case, it was just triggered by just existing. But if you were to switch to it like we did with these ones here, if I switch to that water effect, then all of a sudden the screen would fill up. So let's give that a test. So let's do water before, after. Let's just copy all of that, make it easier. And we'll edit that one on CodePen as well. So let's put all this at the bottom. So I don't need the bubbles. Let's get rid of the bubbles. Wipe skew. Get rid of the bubbles. So just bubbles and then this other thing. So when I click on it, I'm going to switch it to bubbles instead of the other. So let's do that. No, water. And then this one is, so when I click on it, it switches to the other. So there we go. And there's the water level, and if I click on that, it goes back to the other. So you can do some cool little animations by that kind of thing too. So it works the same way. You can just click on something and then it, yeah. Make sense?
Yeah.
It's really neat, eh?
Yeah, I love working with this stuff. It's real fun. I've had a lot of fun with it the last few days for working on my final project. But yeah, that's really cool. And that's everything. Hope this has been informative. You guys have any questions?
Thanks a lot, Stephen.
No worries. Do you guys have any questions?
Oh, no.
No questions on my side.
Cool. I'm going to end the video. Thanks for watching.